Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to Connected Learning TV. I'm Elise Eidman-Aadahl. I'm a director at the National Writing Project in Berkeley, California, and pleased to welcome you to our 55th webinar in a weekly series started here at Connected Learning TV last March. And we've really enjoyed this time talking with all of you, thinking through some challenging questions and sharing some great stories about what's possible when it comes to reimagining learning. So thank you for joining us again today. A few details before we launch into today's conversation. For those of you watching the program on live stream, we really encourage you to use the chat stream, introduce yourselves, connect with each other, share resources, pose questions. If you do, we'll capture them and bring them into the Google Plus Hangout as we can. And speaking of Google Plus, here at Connected Learning, we have a newly launched Connected Learning community. There's already over 1,000 members there. We'd love you to be part of the conversations happening there. The link to that G Plus community will be located in the live stream chat. And finally, there's a URL for our public group notes. It's an open Google Doc for today. It should be included in the live stream chat as well, and we would really love your assistance in capturing the highlights from your point of view of today's program, and also, of course, sharing any resources that you come across. So today's topic, we're back to one of our favorite projects and places, YOUmedia, and looking at their progress as a connected learning space inside the Chicago Public Library. And our key guests today are Penny Sebring and Eric Brown. They've been involved in documenting and reporting on the YOUmedia project in Chicago really all the way through. But before we introduce them and have them start and launch into a conversation, we want to introduce two more guests who'll be joining us today. First off, Brother Mike Hawkins, and secondly, Taylor Bayless. And we're going to give you both a chance to introduce yourselves first before we get back to Eric and Penny. Brother Mike, would you introduce yourself and make sure you're not on mute?
Okay, of course. Hi everybody, my name is Brother Mike Hawkins. I work at Digital Youth Network. We're partners with the Chicago Public Library to help create the space YOUmedia. And in that capacity, I've been doing, my title there is a YOUmedia coordinator, basically helping develop and implement programs with our mentors there.
Thanks, Brother Mike. And Taylor?
Hi, I'm Taylor. I'm a librarian at YOUmedia Chicago in our downtown space. And I have been with YOUmedia since the very beginning, and I'm really excited to hear what Penny and Eric have to say today.
That's great. Thank you both. Thank you. And now let's move to our guests. So we're joined today by Penny Sebring and Eric Brown from the Urban Education Institute at the University of Chicago's Consortium on Chicago School Research. And throughout the program, we'll be probably calling it CCSR, folks. So, okay. Which is probably how it's known to most people, actually.
Yes, that's right.
Penny is the founding director of CCSR and a senior research associate at the University of Chicago. And there's many things to know, including the fact that she was formerly a Peace Corps volunteer and a high school teacher, brings all that to this research and evaluation work. And Eric Brown is a CCSR research analyst and involved in projects like the Focus on Freshmen project and the Evaluation of Excellence in Teaching pilot. So thank you so much. We're going to turn it over to the two of you, but if you could start us off with talking a little bit about YOUmedia and a report that you're involved in right now, which is kind of a 2013 update of some of the work we might have learned from the both of you in 2011.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, Elise. And we also want to mention that Eric has entered the doctoral program at Northwestern University. So he is moving along even more in his career. So for those people who are not familiar with YOUmedia, let me say just a little bit about it. It's a digital media infused program at the Chicago Public Library in downtown Chicago. And it's a place where at no cost high school students with a library card can go and they can go and do their homework, and they can hang out with their friends, but they can also get involved in a lot of digital media activities, and they can follow their interests and learn more about poetry and gaming and video and photography and a number of other things. And so we actually have a picture now. Maybe you're going to not see us for a few minutes, and we're going to show you a few images.
Yes.
So this picture is one that's actually on the YOUmedia website, and it shows kids engaged in various activities. Shortly after YOUmedia started, we began our study, and our study was supported by the MacArthur Foundation. And we have spent 3 years at YOUmedia. We've spent a lot of time observing, talking to teens, talking to the staff. We've done surveys. We've done censuses where we go in for a whole week and we talk to every single person, every single young person there. And Eric actually has spent a good deal of time there. We call him our embedded researcher. One of the things that we were able to do was just to estimate the number of kids who come to YOUmedia each week, and we estimate that between 350 and 500 teens come to YOUmedia each week, so they are serving a large number of teens. So we're going to move to our next image. We view YOUmedia as a hybrid organization. That is, it has elements of unstructured programs, which you see on the left of this image, and structured programs, the characteristics of which are on the right. And notice that on the second line that, excuse me, YOUmedia tilts towards a lot of teen choice. So teens have a lot of choice on how they spend their time. But at the same time, if you look at the fourth line, you see that the adults are very involved in mentoring, both the librarians and the Digital Youth Network staff. So it's really a mixture of things. And this design really affects how teens participate in YOUmedia. So we'll stay on this for a minute. I don't have a slide on this, but I want to tell you a little bit about the characteristics of the young people who come to YOUmedia. So these are all high school age teens. About 2/3 of them are African American. The largest single group is African American males, and they come very often to work in the sound studio. So he has its own sound studio. Over 3/4 of the teens live 5 miles away or more, so they're making a real commitment of time and money to get there. And over half of them have been coming for more than a year, and they come pretty consistently as well. Some of the teens are going to school nearby. Some are stopping at YOUmedia on their way home from school, but about half of them make a special trip. So again, they're making a real commitment. The teen population is a real mixture of a diverse group. About 1/3 of them attend selective enrollment schools in Chicago, and it's very hard to get into these schools, so these are high achieving kids. But the other 2/3 attend regular schools, military schools, charter schools. So we have a real mix of young people and quite a diverse group. Okay, so let's look at how they participate. And here, this slide gives you an idea. So we were able, through our surveys and our interviews, to figure out 5 participation types, and these are shown here. About 18% of them are socializers, so that means they hang out with friends, they get on Facebook, they go to some of the workshops, but less than half of them do that. The next group is what we call our reader studiers, and they use YOUmedia like a library. So they get on the computers to do their schoolwork, librarians, they work on their homework. The next group is what we call floaters, and these are these are teens who come in and they're more involved than the previous two groups in the digital media activities, but they tend to float from one interest to another. So they're really checking out video, gaming, poetry, and getting a real smattering of a number of different areas. Then our next to the last group are experimenters. They're only 11% of the group, and this is primarily a group of African American males who come to use the keyboard and the computers to practice and to create music. They, almost three quarters of them have taken workshops, although they don't spend a lot of time with the mentors. They kind of come in and use the stuff, and then they leave. The last group is our creator group, and I think this group exemplifies what we imagined YOUmedia participants would do. And these are the teens who spend a lot of time. They work with the mentors closely. They've taken a lot of workshops. About half of this group are very interested in music. That's our African American males. The other half are involved in a number of different media, videos, multimedia, graphic design, and other things. And that's a more mixed group of males and females. So that gives you an idea of who the participants are. And then Eric is going to tell us, we asked kids about, what are the benefits you see in coming to YOUmedia? And so Eric's going to take over now.
Sure. So here we have some results from our survey of YOUmedia. And one of the main benefits that you'll see here is YOUmedia is a safe, welcoming, and stimulating place to be. So you can see here that at least 65% of the teens responding to our survey report having a personal connection with a mentor or a librarian in the space. And they feel like they're an important member of the community. It's also, our survey results reveal that it's also a place where they can get interested in new areas and new interests. They can pursue interests. And very importantly here, it's a place where it's cool to be excited about your interests. So the teens at YOUmedia view pursuing your interests as a cool and exciting thing to do. Because we've done interviews with teens, we asked a couple of them, why do they come to YOUmedia? And we felt like a couple of these quotes kind of illustrate some of the points that we're mentioning here with the survey results. So one teen told us, because it's super awesome, fun, positive, and safe. And another teen shared that it is a great place to be. Definitely have built a family with everyone here. And I can't imagine being anywhere else if YOUmedia didn't exist. And so we're moving on now to talking about improvement in digital media skills. And this graph here shows the number of digital media skills in which teens reported improvement. And just for clarification, the green bar represents 0 skills, the red bar represents 1 digital media skill, and the blue bar represents 2 or more, or excuse me, 2 to 6 digital media skills. And by digital media skills, we basically mean graphic design, video, podcasting, creating websites, and also creating and recording music. So you'll notice that about half of the teens across the different participant types reported improving in at least 1 skill due to YOUmedia. The exception would be our creator group. And you'll notice that 84% of them improved in 1 or more skills, and 60% improved in 2 or more skills. And so we want to move on from talking about digital media skills to talking about how YOUmedia help teens improve their academic skills. And we asked teens to give us a sense of whether or not their participation in YOUmedia helped them to improve their schoolwork, which you see here in blue, writing skills, which you see here in red, and ability to communicate with adults, which you'll see here in green. And you'll notice that the socializers, as Penny had described earlier, the group who mainly comes to YOUmedia to hang out, even they're reporting some benefits, with 40 to 50% of them saying that they've improved in schoolwork, writing skills, and communicating better with adults. The reader studier group also claim that they improved, and their schoolwork and ability to communicate with adults was especially high in this case. And it's important to note that these are the students who are coming to do their assignments and They also interact a lot with the mentors and the librarians, and so that's consistent. Their reports are consistent with what we've noted in many observations of YOUmedia. The floaters are kind of like the Socializer group. So again, they're reporting some benefits between 40 to 50%. And the majority of experimenters reported benefits for schoolwork and writing, but less so for communicating with adults. And again, that's also consistent. Spending time at YOUmedia, I often saw a group of teens who would come and make a beeline for the equipment that was out for them to use, but they wouldn't necessarily interact a lot with the mentors. And then lastly, our creators clearly reported the greatest benefits. So about 3/4 of these teens reported YOUmedia helped with understanding, helped with schoolwork and writing skills and communicating better with adults. So we also, we don't have a graph of this, but we also asked teens whether or not YOUmedia helped them understand more about their opportunities after high school. And we should note that this varied across the different participation types. But a lot of the creators and the experimenters reported that YOUmedia helped them understand more about their opportunities after high school. And the resources at YOUmedia, the college and scholarship reference books, the individual guidance and encouragement that a lot of the teens receive through their interactions with the librarians and the mentors. And then lastly, just the workshops that they're participating in. So they have the opportunities to not only create things, but also showcase some of their work. And in a lot of cases, through the partnerships with YOUmedia, work with high-profile clients where they're able to sort of be exposed in, to a number of fields, whether it's art or journalism or video editing, music, film, and writing. So we believe that the combination of these different elements also help kids to think about opportunities after high school. And the last slide here is referring to the trade-off between engagement and skill building. So when we talked with mentors about the design of learning activities at YOUmedia, and I should note that there has since been the addition of different types of learning activities. But during the course of our study, there were mainly 2 different types. So you had these workshops which were multi-session and designed with like a progressive learning objective. So very much like school. And they were also designed to build specific skill sets. On the other hand, you had projects through the partnerships, the external partnerships that YOUmedia was able to bring into the space. And these were more so dependent upon the parameters that the partner outlined. And they were usually intended to complete a specific objective. So I'm not going to read through the rest of the writing on a slide here, but what you'll notice is that even in the design of learning activities, that there's a trade-off between whether or not you have a lot of engagement and not so much attrition, and also opportunities for skill building. And the question for mentors and librarians in the space becomes, how can they design learning activities with an adequate amount of engagement and opportunities for skill building?
Okay, and then we're going to come back to us now, and we want to bring Taylor and Brother Mike into the conversation here. And we're going to come back to that question that Eric raised, but there's some other things we want to ask about first. So, Brother Mike and Taylor, one of our main conclusions was that YOUmedia has been quite successful in attracting a large group of teens. And as I reported, they come from far away. They spend quite a bit of time there. And so I think other people who are starting up their own learning laboratories would, and even teachers and librarians, would love to hear both of you talk about why you think you were so successful in attracting and keeping this large group of teens. And so then we should.
I think one of the main things is the variety of activity that's happening in this. we just offered workshops and that's it, I don't think we would have attracted the main number of, or the large number of students that we had. And also the fact that just on any given day in YOUmedia, there's so many different things for them to choose from to do. So not every single day looks exactly the same. You know, when they first come in, they might be hanging out with their friends, and then the next hour they may be messing around with a piece of equipment, and then they may do a workshop after that and then go back to hanging out. So it's a really multifaceted experience they get, and I think that's one of the main reasons they stick around for so long, because it doesn't get boring to them.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, you know, Taylor's right on with that. I also think too, just in terms of just some of the numbers reads that we're looking at, you know, we're talking about a community that doesn't have a lot of access to things in terms of, you know, basically the digital equality, right? So a lot of these, you know, young African American males who are coming through, they may not have this access at home or in their school. So YOUmedia becomes, you know, a foundation for them to have access and kind of equal the playing field. But also on top of that, when you have, as Taylor alluded to, this variety of opportunities that kids can plug into, whether they're touch point or deep, uh, you know, that kind of takes away like, oh, I have to really know something. Uh, you know, I have to have this large skill base to get into a program. So, and we have some of that, as Eric talked about with the project connections, where kids are really applying their skills. And then we have the workshops, and what the library has been amazing at, you know, in probably like the last 6 months or so, is creating these one-off opportunities where students can kind of just come in. There's a group of kids doing something fun, and Taylor could talk about that because she's really owning that space. Um, but I think that's what really drives it. And then also just the relationships, the cultural capital of all the folks there. So like, you know, if it's hip hop, poetry, kind of pop culture stuff, like I'm your guy. When it comes to gaming, you know, I'm gonna hand that off to Taylor. So kids are able to see, uh, you know, who the heart and soul of the space is through their system of reality, right? So for me, like a lot of the gaming kids, they like me, but they love Taylor. So you got to have, you know, those folks in there who can really speak to, uh, you know, the culture of a student, whether it's or race and culture, really. So the window and the mirror. We always kind of talk about that in our programming, and I think YOUmedia was, we've always kind of been intentional about that window and mirror piece. And as and finally, as interests kind of pop up, we try to meet that need, and the library again a perfect example of that. That wasn't the program scope when we first started YOUmedia. She was the one that kind of talked to those students and was able to engage that group and say, oh, you all do blogs and games, let's do something together. Just as I was able to capitalize with that with the poets. They were like, oh, well, we have this poetry workshop but nowhere to perform it. We, you know, so really just building on the cultural capital piece.
Yeah, so Penny and Eric, if you wouldn't mind, I know we're going to go right back to you in a second, but just to insert a little question for Taylor and Mike based on some of what you've just been talking about, and you've named a couple of different programs that characterize YOUmedia Chicago, but apart from programs like the Library of Games or Lyricist Loft that you've mentioned, there's a kind of philosophy of mentoring, a particular spin on the word mentor. And Eric and Penny, in your slide where we saw sort of a diagram and you had YOUmedia way over on the mentoring side, there's a particular style or type of mentoring, in effect, that operates at YOUmedia. And I wonder if we could just get a little gloss on that before we go back to some of the findings for our listeners. Taylor or Brother Mike?
So from our lens, Digital Youth Network, what we've tried to bring into the space and practice with all our mentors is pretty much a 4-domain approach to what makes a mentor through our lens, and that's having the skills. So having the ability to teach a kid, you know, what you know. Web 2.0 skills where you can kind of meet a kid where they are, being able to connect in today's 21st century world, if you will. Cultural capital, and again, that could be multifaceted, but that's something that we kind of look for our mentors. And then also a digital portfolio. So as a kid is looking at, me as an instructor, they can see the portfolio of work that I have. But also, we want mentors to build a portfolio of work through the professional development that we give them to help develop curriculum, badges, and things like that.
So mentors are forming the kinds of supportive relationships I think that we often associate with mentors. But I appreciate your mentioning there is the skills piece, this portfolio piece. So youth can come in and see, here's somebody who does know how to actually work in the music industry, or someone who has created things, or brings the skills into the space as well. Seems important.
And Taylor, with the one-off programs, like being able to take existing things and have mentors, librarians adapt those things for their program. So, for us, it might be you have to write curriculum and implement, and in other spaces, it's how do you apply curriculum in a context, which is a skill in itself as well.
Penny, Eric, does that correlate with what you saw as you observed?
Definitely. So building on this notion of mentorship, we wanted to bring it out a bit wider and talk about the community as a whole. So, the adults, librarians, and DYN teaching artists who are all serving as mentors for the kids, and then the kids who are coming. And one thing that the kids told us over and over again is that like they love it here and they feel like this is a place for them, and that YOUmedia was like able to sort of create a deep sense of community for the youth who were coming there. And so I wondered if Brother Mike and Taylor could share on how they were able, as adults in the space, how they were able to sort of facilitate that deep sense of community that youth told us that they were experiencing.
I think one of the biggest things, and may seem somewhat counterintuitive, is we don't have any sort of advisory council in the YOUmedia space, pretty intentionally, because sometimes you find with that advisory council, only the kids who are part of that feel like they're part of the community. So we really want kids to be able to tell us all the time what they like and what they don't like, and feel like everyone has a voice, and be able to really, adapt quickly to their changing needs or changing opinions of the space. That's one of the really big things. And I think the biggest thing that I tell our staff is listen, no matter what a kid is coming up to you talking about. It can be something absolutely ridiculous. If they want to talk to you about Magic the Gathering for an hour, run with it and listen to it. And don't fake your interest. I mean, really be there to listen to them, no matter what it is.
And I think from my perspective, what I've seen is all the mentors in the space, and I'm using mentors broadly, both DYN and Chicago Public Library staff in the space. What we've done a good job at, I think, is really, there's the open kind of culture where we're all kind of, invested in making YOUmedia better. And then also flooding that culture into, you'll see it reflected in each individual workshop or project as well. So there's a common language that kind of comes off, and a common practice. So like, and kids end up in some cases, like we'll take, lyricist law, for example, where kids really police themselves a lot. They'll check each other back and forth. They'll say respect the mic, which means, while somebody's speaking, respect that person's, space. So, I mean, that's just one example of many. I mean, there's little memes that even popped up at the space. So like our circulation desk, which we affectionately call the kitchen table, You know, you'll see like post-it note memes, and you'll see these little mini cultures kind of popping up for these, you know, byproducts of the culture. Or somebody's birthday, everybody in the space gives a round of applause. It's like this beautiful feeling. And it's those little moments that, you know, kind of get missed sometimes. But, you know, we all know if you're there every day, you're a regular, you're going to expect those things, or you'll witness those things.
And we can.
Yeah, so Penny and Eric, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Great.
I'm just reading the question.
Don't worry about that. Just respond. We'll get that in.
Sorry, we should go on then?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, well, I just wanted to, Eric, why don't you explain what Lyricist Loft is? Because some of our viewers may not know what that is.
So as the embedded researcher, Lyricist Loft was actually one of my favorite things to observe. And like Brother Mike said, and I totally concur, it was something interesting for me to see, is that the kids would definitely police themselves. So you did see that there. But what you also saw is a number of kids perfecting their craft over time. And as someone, you know, outside of my professional life who tries to keep up with, you know, pop culture and music, and Brother Mike and I converse about that all the time, it was really interesting to see individuals like Chance the Rapper or kids these days actually come through YOUmedia and sort of cultivate and groom themselves as performers. And now these are individuals who are sort of gaining a national following as they're going out and touring and participating in or performing, I should say, in larger venues. And so Lyricist Loft is essentially a space where teens can perform regardless of the skill level where they're at. And because of that deep sense of community that was created, I think all kids, or many kids I should say, feel encouraged to perform because they know that they'll be supported and appreciated by their peers who are watching them.
Okay, so we're going to go on with another question for Taylor and Brother Mike. As I said earlier, about half of the teens are really very busy and busily engaged at YOUmedia, and about a quarter of them are these reader-studiers who are using the resources of the library for their schoolwork, and they're consulting with librarians, but they are also taking some digital media workshops. And then the other quarter are the creators who come often, who spend a lot of time there, who are really engaged in their interests. And you know, most of the time, in fact, all the time, what we do at the consortium is we study schools. And we see a big difference in when we're walking into classrooms in high schools. We don't see the kind of engagement that we see at YOUmedia. So you have these teens who are persisting in their projects and in their interests, whether it's songs or poetry or producing the podcasts for the library games. So I wonder, Brother Mike and Taylor, if you could talk about how you really get them to or maybe it's not so much up to you, but how do these kids really get engaged and persist and actually produce artifacts and produce media, or in the case of poetry? So what do you do to make that happen?
I think some of the best programs we've already mentioned, like Lyricist Loft, Library of Games, and also ULit, which is our online literary magazine, are the ones where the kids take the leadership roles. And they're really the ones that are driving the creation of the product and defining what they're actually going to create, and come up with a vision for things. And when I do the Library of Games program, I just think of myself somewhat as an observer or someone to poke and prod them in the right ways and help them with skills, but they're really the ones deciding what the project's going to be they're taking on the roles. It's the same thing with Lyricist Loft. The kids who are doing that, they're playing the role of DJ and of MC for the program. And, you know, Mike's there and he's watching them and making sure that everything's okay and, you know, providing any help that he can. But it's really the kids driving it. And when it's their vision and their project, then that's really when they become really fully engaged and devoted to the program.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and just quick piggyback, I think when we talk about the artifact creation, because the kids create a lot of amazing things there. You know, some don't, quite honestly, and I think what's interesting about that is the playing field's the same. Like the critique that they get, the belief that they get in the beginning. Like I think one of the things that's so beautiful about the space is that any kid who encounters a mentor there is going to encounter somebody that believes in them, even if they don't believe in themselves, right? We've had many folks question their writing or where they should go. Like I'm sure Taylor could touch on Birdie, who's one of our library games kids, who's just an amazing writer, but he struggles with some things. But at the end of the day, everybody believes in him, and there's some results we'll talk about, you know, some outcomes with those students based on that belief. But I think that's a core piece really embedded in the culture of YOUmedia. And then also that we recognize their interest and they recognize that, you know, we might have a top-down program. We're going to say, hey, you guys are going to do your robotics. And, you know, if we don't get a robust kind of, you know, uptake by the community, a lot of times they'll redefine the program and say, this is what we really want to do. And they recognize when we've made those shifts for them. And I think the last piece, which I think is so key, that the mentorship can't be owned by us, right? When we connect with professional partners, I mean, we worked with Google, the Kennedy Center, Born This Way Foundation, and many others, but this embeds that belief and that creation of artifacts in real world experiences with professional mentors, you know, outside of us. So they might be like, oh, Brother Mike and Taylor, you're telling us to revise it again. But when they have those professional, you know, mentors and the client constraints, then they're working, again, in a real world aspect where they're collaborating with one another and they're bringing an idea to life, right?
So Brother Mike, if
so key.
You sort of talking about that really points to some of the ways that elements of YOUmedia are pretty broadly and openly networked. You just said, you know, the range of partners that are involved in mentoring. And I'm wondering for our viewers, just to be clear, we've all used the phrase space a lot when kids are in the space or you're in the space or the space feels like. And we saw a picture of this fabulous space in the library. But let viewers get a sense of, is this kind of a self-contained thing, offers workshops, etc., but that could be one image, but you've also talked a little bit about the way that it's networked with other things. So what are the spaces that are part of the YOUmedia space, just to clarify the different ways that youth can move between and among the space? And could be actually anyone.
But I think there's, you know, I mean, to just break it down into two pieces. So the space is broken down. It's a 5,000 square foot space. It's broken into, and let me stop using the word just space. It's a
yeah, the library space itself.
Right. So it's kind of like a loft, if you will, on the first floor of the library. Really open. It's broken into 3 sections, which we call hanging out, messing around, eating out. We don't use that language with the students, but you know, that's how we kind of denote it. The hangout space, you walk in, and that's your immediate note that this, and we often get, you know, from patrons, am I in the library? You know, as soon as they walk in, because they, are hit with video games. There's kids rapping or performing, but they also see books. So they're really confused. As one of our students, Armani, noted, he was like, I didn't know where I was. so you have that, and then you have the messing around space, which is in the middle. That's where kids check in. There's also desktop and various stations where they can play games or check their Facebook and stuff like that. But also we try to leave a lot of equipment out so they can kind of, again, just get their hands dirty. So like every Tuesday, for example, our graphic design mentor pulls out the smart board and a bunch of Wacom tablets, and kids can kind of just mess around, if you will. There's a studio space in the messing around area as well, and with the 1 or 2 classes of certification, they can use that. So it's a really playful, open area. And then finally, we have our geeking out space, which is like walking into a design studio, if you will. This is where we do a lot of the workshops and projects.
And then outside the library, Taylor, there's also online spaces that people participate in or connect through that are even not the physical space.
Yes, there's also a iRemix platform, online space. It's used by all of the Hive Chicago. So it's not just kids at YOUmedia using it, it's kids from a lot of different organizations throughout the city. So the kids can take their learning home with them. So they can post their work there, they can get mentor feedback and peer feedback on there, and soon badges on there as well. So the learning can continue even outside of the space. And a lot of our kids, go to school with each other. They create friend groups in the space. It's really interesting that a lot of times on the weekends, YOUmedia becomes the site where groups of kids will meet up before going off to do something else. It's really become kind of a social focal point for a lot of kids in the city.
And Penny and Eric, that I see you nodding. Did you see that in your data as well?
Definitely.
Yes, the prodding question.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Just the observation, or I should say, through our observations, we were able to see some of the participation types, or not. I shouldn't say participation types, but we were able to see the participation within the spaces that Brother Mike mentioned, and in addition to the online space as well. And so that actually kind of picks up on something that we wanted to pose to Brother Mike and Taylor, because Penny and I had showed a slide earlier about improving skills. And one of the things that we weren't able to do, because our study was primarily descriptive, was to link participation type to the skill improvement. So we want to ask Brother Mike and Taylor a twofold question. The first question being around why they think teens were able to improve, the skills that we talked about, writing and schoolwork and verbal communication. But then also to talk about whether or not there's a goal or a thrust among the staff, librarians and DYN staff, of moving kids between, a participation type of a socializer or a floater to someone who's more of an experimenter or a creator, for example.
Well, from my perspective, I think we have been very intentional since the beginning to really think about what are these pathways for youth. And sometimes, we failed. When we came in with the kind of top-down approach, that failed for us for a while. Like, we're like, no kids are coming to the workshop, so what's happening? But that forced us to get down on the ground with the students and, start having these conversations with them to pull their interest out. And it was a slow process, but after the first year, you started to see those kids start to shift and move into, more engaging programs, because the programs weren't just coming from, the mentors or the higher ups saying this is what needs to be happening, but it was coming from them. And so it was an interesting space where we can meet in the middle. And when we were able to meet in the middle, that's where you get some of the best programs that have come out. So ULIT again, library games, just so many that we can kind of name as our signature projects came through that kind of top-down, bottom-up approach and meeting in the middle. And I think, when we talk about that belief system again, I think a lot of our kids just don't think they could do it, or they have a skill and they don't see a trajectory or a pathway. They say, I want to use a skill, and one kid, well, and they don't necessarily know what that means. So one kid might be like, I want to go in there and rap. I want to make beats or whatever. So we try to, based on their interest, try to help them, develop a pathway for themselves, whether it's sitting down, laying out a trajectory, or kind of pinging them to multiple trajectories. If you're interested in music, you can make a lot of money doing music for games. Have you talked to Taylor? Like they did a whole podcast on that. So it's really kind of, helping, for us to kind of ping off of each other to help kids get better. And that's what I think creates the learning ecology at YOUmedia, that we're constantly offering, so many different things that kids can get into, as Taylor said.
Yeah, and I think what Mike was saying about sort of lowering the barrier for them for participation is really important. I think a lot of kids are a little scared of digital projects to begin with. If you have a kid who wants to be a game designer and you approach them with a project that's, 6-week intensive, let's design a game, that is not necessarily going to be, some kids may get really into it, but a lot of kids who think of themselves as kind of the socializer in the space aren't necessarily going to join into that. So you have to find other ways of engaging them by doing something simple, or maybe taking it back to an analog program, like modding a board game instead of sitting them down in front of a computer and telling them to, program. And I think from my perspective, and from the library perspective, historically the library is really comfortable with having students in the space just socializing and not being a part of projects. So, I'm just glad that kids are in the space. Ideally, I think, yes, we want our kids all to be creators, but if they're not all creators, it's not a giant problem because they're in the space and they're gaining something from it. And I think what's great about seeing the research is seeing that even the kids that are just coming in and socializing are gaining, verbal skills, communication skills, and writing skills. And I think that really speaks to, some of the things we do in the socializing hangout time. If you go to the YOUmedia desk at any time, we're probably debating with a student about something. Eric was part of some of those debates when he was an embedded researcher. So, they may not be in a workshop, but they're talking with an adult about something that's important to them, and the adult is pushing them in some way or questioning what they think or what their mindset is, and that's incredibly important.
The piece that you're speaking to, of you, Brother Mike and Taylor, was of interest to folks that from that slide with the types, and a question about whether, how young people might move among types, floater, creator, etc. Another interesting slide that Penny, you and Eric had up, I think connects to something you said, Taylor, this the trade-offs between the workshops and the projects. So Taylor, you were talking about sort of the importance of those introductory skills. And Penny and Eric, your slides seem to suggest that on the one hand, the workshops are a little more challenged in engagement, but effective at an introductory skill level. And the project's less effective at those introductory skills, more effective kind of at high-end skills and engagement. I wonder if you all could unpack that a little bit more.
You mean us?
Anybody.
Well, for me, as we looked at programming, especially reflecting on, the last couple years, especially when, we would have these, higher level projects that would come through, you're forced to almost pick kids that have the skills, right? Um, versus helping kids develop those skills in a workshop context. So when those projects come up, now you have another pathway, right? So I think what we've done intentionally is to give a kid a set of learning opportunities uh, where they can connect to, kind of the one-off introductory thing. Because it might just be you're scared to get into a community. You don't know anybody. And what Taylor and the library has really done really amazing, again, is, building these kind of, come play test, here we're just messing around with stuff, come on in, no sign up, just come chill. And that creates a sense of community. It's very low barrier. And think the second level, is the workshop. Like, okay, I want to really develop my skills in GarageBand or poetry or whatever, or podcasting, and I use podcasting and say, hey, now I want to do that library about games podcast, and I have the skills to be the engineer or host or whatever. So we want to create a in-house trajectory that leads kids to these, higher level signature projects within the space, but also if something comes up outside the space, then we have a clear view of our participants and their skill sets. And as badges come into the mix, that's going to add another layer to help us identify those students as well, which should be amazing, I think.
Yeah, I think, and speaking to, the skill-based workshops had low engagement. I think sometimes when you say to a kid, you're going to come to a workshop, you're going to learn how to use GarageBand, that's not really meaningful to them. But when you can say to a kid, okay, you're going to come and you're going to make a song for this project, that's meaningful to them. So I think the challenge for us as program designers is to think about how we create projects where the focus of what we're doing is creating a product that's going to live somewhere outside in the real world, not just, in YOUmedia. And being able to take a kid who has little to no skills and get them to be able to gain those skills through that project. And unfortunately, sometimes, as much as we love working with partners, sometimes you can't do that with a partner project where they're expecting a product out of it, a really nice polished product out of that. I think something like ULIT is a nice hybrid where, the magazine's going to go and it's going to live on a website. It gets lots of views, which is exciting for kids to work on. But kids can join that with absolutely zero graphic design skills. And they can learn the graphic design skills laying that issue out. And that's going to go live on the website. But, we don't have to hand select kids for that with really great skills, because we're doing it on our own schedule, not on the schedule of an external partner.
Yeah. Penny, and we're looking at just a few more minutes left in the hour, and I wonder if we could go back to you.
Sure.
To kind of say, what do you see here?
Yeah, so I think I'm glad that Brother Mike and Taylor brought up these points in relation to what we found concerning the trade-off between skill building engagement and engagement, because we were thinking as a research team about the connected learning model, which Mimi Ito and her colleagues were developing towards the end of our data collection. And so we were aware of the model, but we didn't really have a way to test for it in our data collection. And I think that we saw for this creator group, some remnants or elements of connected learning happening. But then we also saw with this whole trade-off that we're talking about, that some kids, just by virtue of the fact that they may not know how to use GarageBand, they may not be able to participate in a really exciting opportunity like what's going on now. And so I don't think as a research team we come down one way or the other on this whole notion of moving kids from being socializers or floaters to being more experimenters or creators. I think that from our perspective, it's a question that we're raising and lifting up as they continue to sort of evolve the program. And I think these different learning activities that they've developed are a testament to the innovation or the innovative nature of YOUmedia, and to the responsive sort of teaching or mentoring or instructional design that's prevalent in the space. So, you know, Brother Mike had mentioned earlier that if a teen tells us that, you know, this robotics, the way that you've made it, is not working out for us, they'll change it to be more appealing to the teens.
So connected learning doesn't just happen, it's sort of a design problem is what I'm hearing from you, a challenge of that designers go through.
Right. So and I think going forward, what I would imagine, and Brother Mike and Taylor can confirm this or not, that there will be, especially with the badges, that there will be more fulfillment of the connected learning idea, particularly, and the idea of connected learning is that these activities that are going on at YOUmedia will have some importance for a youth's academic achievement, or career opportunities, or opportunities for civic engagement. And so we saw some of that, but as Eric said, you know, these ideas came along later after YOUmedia had already been formed, and but we did see that some of these were being adopted. But I would imagine that the badges may be able to make those opportunities more explicit about those linkages.
Mm-hmm.
Fabulous. And one thought, you look like you were about to share a last thought, Brother Mike?
Oh, that was strictly a breath.
You can take a breath.
Well, that's good, and everyone should be able to do that. That's great. In fact, we hope also the viewers, because we are at the end of the hour. But actually, thank you so much, Penny and Eric. You've actually named, which is what's wonderful when people come and do research, named some challenges. I call them design challenges. I don't know if you would, but some elements that probably everyone in the space as mentors and people who care about work with youth would be thinking through in their own programs. So we hope everybody is going to join this conversation. It's sort of the conversation about how we create more opportunities for connected learning. So please, if you've been watching or if you're listening in some fashion, please continue the conversation. We invite you to use the hashtag Connected Learning, to keep having a conversation about the issues from today's program. And later this afternoon, we'll have a full recording of the webinar up and all the connected, curated content that's been generated during the program, and a few other things that you can see and participate in. This is a big, great, wonderful start to a conversation. Please join us in that. And post your comments. So thank you, guests, for participating. This was really wonderful. And everyone else, thanks for tuning in.
Thank you. Thanks very much.